Year 12, it's now time to move on and start looking at not planes, trains and automobiles, but brains, bikes and the body theory. So after looking at that rather complex criticism of the circularity argument, which kind of suggests that, well, you can't really discover personal identity through psychological continuity because personal identity needs to exist beforehand to establish psychological continuity, because basically it's what generates the memories through experience, all that stuff. Now that we've done that, we can kind of say, well, perhaps there's something else that has personal identity that allows for the formation of those experiences to occur. You get what I mean? And if you look at the title, it might be the brain, it might be the body, who knows? So let's have a look at what we're going to try and achieve today. Well, we're going to explore what philosophical insight we can develop if we posit that the brain or the body hold personal identity. So, first thing we need to do is we need to explore how Michaels tries to deal with the problem of circularity that she mentioned before. Then we're going to explore the implications of suggesting that the brain or the body holds personal identity. It has it, and maybe we could think it is the presupposed condition that exists to allow personal identity to form in the first place. But she doesn't actually get that deep, all right? And thirdly, we're going to look at a summary, and we're going to build prior knowledge, then we're going to go into a reading of what, as you probably would have guessed, is a short couple of paragraphs, all right? So what I want you to do is quickly score yourself on the success criteria, and then have a look at this APK. And it's really important. I want you to find a picture that outlines how the brain, not the mind, creates memory. Just explore that picture, and we'll see if what you've drawn would kind of correlate to what Michaels is alluding to as we go through the summary. All right, cheers. So it's worth noting that Michaels hasn't really explored the issue of circularity for the sake of just being contrary. What she really wants to do is she wants it to be like an engine or some kind of spark that allows her to move in another way to find the true source of that presupposed personal identity that should be there in order for psychological continuity to form in the first place. So when we read this section, she starts by trying to fend off the issue, push it away, of circularity and its criticism of Locke's theory of psychological continuity, right? And she basically has this idea of what if we find memories, not necessarily in consciousness, but we'll find them inside the brain. And of course that logically alludes to, well, if memories are inside the brain, obviously we might suggest that that's where consciousness is and personal identity as well. So you see how it unfolds. Take a note. So we could say that the way that we verify if these memories are correct, if these are true, genuine memories, is to see that if we've got Wanda's brain, right? Because Wanda's brain owns the memories. That's what a lot of people would argue in this day of secular scientific thought, okay? And this means that the brain is the holder of memory, right? Take a note. So if the brain is the holder of memory, then it's also the human organ that experiences it. So not only is it the organ that holds memory, it's also the organ that produces memory. It makes memory through experience and then recording that experience and storing it. Take a note. Now, as you can see, this brain theory of personal identity seems like a pretty good solution, but Meredith Michaels, she kind of rejects it, all right? She doesn't outright reject it, but she says this definition of personal identity has some problems. And what she does is she invites us to consider what it would be like if Wanda was riding a bike, okay? Now, if we have memories of Wanda riding a bike, then Wanda will say, I rode a bike. And we'd all say that the brain holds those memories, wouldn't we? But what about when Wanda was learning to ride a bike? What if Wanda remembers what it's like to learn to ride a bike? Well, we'd say that the brain creates the experiences, wouldn't we? Most of us would do that. But the problem is, and she quite rightly points this out, the brain isn't the only part of the body that is involved in making those experiences. We've got the rest of the central nervous system, we've got the rest of the body's organs and the body itself, which is actually producing that experience, which in turn gets converted into memory, which may be held in the brain. All right? So the point is that the brain can't produce experience alone. The brain can't learn alone, therefore the brain can't produce experience alone. That's why she says the idea of the brain being the source of that presupposed psychological identity personal identity, is a bit problematic, because obviously the brain doesn't produce experiences by itself. Take a note. So, this argument invites us to consider a different theory, a theory that has been developed by Aristotle, and it's called the body theory, right? And the body theory basically says that the body produces the experiences might get recorded in the brain from her point of view, Meredith's point of view. Don't know if Aristotle said the same thing, but basically they get produced by the body itself and then held in the brain. So, in a sense, the body is producing those memories that use or that create psychological continuity, and it's the beginning, it's the foreground that starts psychological continuity to form, and then of course the brain just holds it, alright? And the brain does produce it as well. It is an organ involved in actively producing it, but the point is the brain doesn't work alone. So let's make it really clear. The body produces the experiences in concert with the brain, because the brain is the body, right? So maybe body theory is the most accurate theory. Take a note. So, if it's the body that produces experiences that starts or initiates psychological continuity because it makes the experiences that get strung together and get held in the brain, but strung together, and consciousness presents itself through those memories, right? But basically it produces the presupposed condition for psychological continuity to form, right? Then you could be in a situation where the brain is deluding the body, okay? Because if you look at her thought experiment, Rachel is really Rachel, because Rachel's body produces the memories and the experiences, okay? The point is, it's Wanda's brain that's actually tricking her into thinking, the point is it's Ross's brain that's actually tricking her into thinking that she's Ross, okay? But actually the body is the progenitor of the memories, it's the creator of the memories, not just the brain alone. So basically, in the Wanda experiment, instead of Wanda being Wanda, Wanda is you. You are really Wanda. It's just that the memories of Wanda are like tricksters, and those memories are tricking you into thinking that you are really, well, in the case of Rachel, Ross, or that you are really Shwanda, or Wanda, in the case of Shwanda, okay? So, we'll go over this again. The body and the brain work together to formulate new experiences and to learn, just like riding a bike, okay? So what we get is a situation where it's the body that is actually producing the initial experiences. Makes sense. These experiences get tied together and form some kind of psychological continuity, because in a sense, that continuity isn't being totally rejected by Meredith. She's just saying that you can't have the circularity argument, because the circularity argument ignores the fact that personal identity is presupposed by its own logic, okay? So, what happens is basically if the body produces the experiences, the body is where personal identity starts, okay? It's the presupposed condition, and it generates experiences that get recorded by the brain. That's really important. And of course the brain then holds consciousness, holds memories, and produces a psychological continuity within it. Okay, that's where personal identity is stored, but not necessarily produced. Take a note. So if we subscribe to same body theory, we get the situation where Rachel is really Rachel, but she's tricked by Ross's brain, because they have Ross's memories, into thinking that she really is Ross, but she's not. She has the body that produced the experiences of Rachel, okay? Or similarly, if we think about Shwanda, you are not really Wanda, You think you are Wanda because you have Wanda's memories. You're tricked. But your body produced the memories of you. Okay? Take a note. So, we get a situation where body theory seems to be really a good option, okay? It's worth noting that this isn't really her totally agreeing with body theory. She's probably going to see some issues with it. More importantly, I'd say some nuances with it, okay? Yeah, body theory, it's a good idea, but you need to consider X, Y, and Z, but still a good idea. That's where I'm predicting she's going to go. But the point is, we're being opened up to the possibility of considering body theory, alright? Take a note. And what does she say? Perhaps it is possible to stop short of circularity. In other words, perhaps it's impossible to escape this logic of circularity, which presupposes that personal identity, which creates memories, had to exist before the memories were created, but the memories create the personal identity. Oh my god, it all falls apart. So let's try and get out of that trap, is what she's inviting us to say. We couldn't say that Shwanda's Wanda memories are genuine because misread that. Why couldn't we say that Shwanda's Wanda memories are genuine because the brain that is remembering them is the same as the brain that had the original experiences? Most people would say that that is brain theory. It makes sense. This is where the memories are held. This is where the consciousness was held. Put it all together, of course, maybe personal identity is the brain. Thus, the experiences are preserved in the very organ that underwent them. Of course, the brain worked in concert with the body to produce the experiences and recorded them. Take a note. Go away. Alright. Though there is an initial plausibility to this response, it fails to solve our problem. She's saying it doesn't work. Suppose that Shwanda is Wanda. So let's say the new body with your brain, with your body and Shwanda's brain put together, alright, is really, for the sake of personal identity, just Wanda. Because Wanda remembers, or is remembering, the experience of learning to ride a bicycle. Though the brain in question is indeed the same, it is nonetheless clear to all of us that brains alone do not learn to ride bicycles. Of course, it requires the rest of the body. Nor indeed do brains alone remember having done so. So it's not just like the brain. You might have muscle memory, you might have other aspects of memory. Okay? People learn to ride bicycles and people remember having done so. And the question we are trying to answer is whether Shwanda, who is remembering the same... remembering, and the question is whether Shwanda is the same person as Wanda, who did the bicycling. So Wanda did the bicycling, her body did it, not just her brain. The appeal to the fact that the same brain is involved in each event does not provide us with a way out of the Lockean circle. Right, stop, think about it. We can't get out of the Lockean circle because if the brain did it, well, of course, we get into that situation of circularity again. Okay, well, the brain is just like, I've got to think of a way to clearly say this. I'm just going to pause this and come back to you for a second. I know what I'm thinking, but I need to clearly say it. Okay, so the reason why it doesn't, from my point of view, escape the Lockean circularity argument is because it's the body that produces the experiences, not just the brain, okay? So if we were to just say it's just the brain, what we've got is a situation where we've got psychological continuity being stored, producing the idea of self, and then basically going back and having to reference that psychological continuity. We're not really referencing the thing that produced the memories in the first place, which is the brain and the body, okay? So take a note. I'll take it again. I'll say it again. If it's just the brain that holds identity, right, we have the Lockean circle, because the brain holds the psychological continuity through the memories, and it holds the consciousness. But again, we get into a situation where, because the brain holds it but doesn't produce it, you know, psychological continuity is just, again, the result of, bang, you got it, the memories being caught in the brain. So, the memories create the sense of psychological continuity, even though they're in the brain. And then that sense of psychological continuity is supposed to generate the sense of self. Okay, what do we do? So therefore, we still need the presupposed condition. We need the thing that actually produced the experiences that end up being recorded in the brain as memory. Take a note. Alright, so Lockean circle. At this point, It is at this point that philosophers begin to reconsider the Aristotelian position mentioned earlier that self-identity is essentially a bodily identity. If the body theory of personal identity is true, then the person lying in bed at the health centre is you deluded into believing that you are Wanda. That is, Shwanda is self-identical to you. Now keep in mind, obviously she's going to go in other places. You don't know that yet. But that's the whole point of reading a text, especially a complex text. We make predictions. So we can predict that she's opening us up into considering this as a possibility, but she needs to explore it with more detail and more nuances. All right? Let's go back. So we're going to explore how Michaels tries to deal with the problem of circularity. She first posits that it's the brain. Then she says, hey, the brain doesn't learn alone. So it can't be the brain that's producing these experiences. Okay? And here we go. That's what happens when we just think that it's the brain. Okay? The brain, if we consider brain theory to be the accurate theory, we get into a situation where we're not talking about the producer of experiences being the beginning or the presupposed condition for personal identity. Right? So we're stuck in the circle. The brain still has the memories, and the memories produce a sense of identity, but that sense of identity is supposed to presuppose or create or be the producer of the memories, but it can't be because you just have the memories. There's no active agent producing them in the first place, all right? So when we move on to body theory, we arrive so far at the conclusion that maybe it is the body which is the presupposed condition, the thing that allows experience to occur in the first place, gets recorded in the brain, and therefore the brain starts associating all these memories with, its understanding of consciousness presenting itself, and yada yada, a sense of psychological continuity is generated. But the presupposed condition, the extra aspect of personal identity, is the body. So the body becomes basically the place of personal identity. All right. We definitely did a summary and we read over her argument. And I think the extra nuance we got from, which we didn't get in the summary, was the fact that we're still trapped in the circularity argument with the brain. I'll say it again. I'm trying to repeat it again. You can tell. If the brain isn't producing experiences by itself, if it isn't learning by itself, but it's recording memory, it only holds the memory that generates the sense of identity. But as we learned before, the memories that create the sense of identity through psychological continuity presuppose an already existing personal identity in the first place to create them and to own them. All right? It's basically, you can't have personal identity without the presupposed idea of the self of personal identity. Okay? So that's what we got. We got the fact that we're still stuck in a Lockean circle if we accept that it's a brain, but if we go to the body, well, we got the producer, and the producer is the first condition. Take a note. All right, so hopefully that all made sense. Again, it's much more complex than it is if we just look at the paragraphs, but hey, we've got to really elaborate on this stuff. Okay, we've got to understand it. All right, cheers.